Okay, William Butler Yeats, fascinating figure. Irish poet, big into Irish nationalism in the late 19th, early 20th century. This leads to the Irish Civil War, Ireland, Northern Ireland, U2 song Sunday Bloody Sunday, anything by the Cranberries. In fact, the Cranberries wrote a song about Yeats. But he was also tied to a group called the Golden Dawn, which was this, think Illuminati, like this occult, supernatural organization in England that, they think Call of Cthulhu. The idea of dabbling in the supernatural, raising spirits, summoning demons, whatever. And he was part of this organization for 30 some odd years. I mean, it was not your daddy's Elks Club. But it was just, it makes him a fascinating character in literature. His poetry, on the other hand, tended to avoid that supernatural mysticism. He referenced real world things. He used real world symbols, traditions, in order to get his ideas across. So again, a lot of biblical references, even though he left the concept of Christianity far behind. But he used the things people were familiar with rather than these mystical ideas that romantics like Shelley and Blake would have used. Because by making his poems more familiar, they were more accessible. So the Second Coming, of course, is a reference to the Second Coming of Christ from the Book of Revelation, which is the Kickstarter to the Apocalypse. Appropriate. He wrote the poem in 1919, just after World War I. Again, most of these guys, World War I, World War II, depending on their time period, was a huge influence on this idea of the world is coming to an end. I mean, nothing like World War I had ever happened. Okay, the Great War, nothing on that scale. The number of people dead, it was just, the enormity was weighing very heavily on people well after the war. So Yeats's Second Coming. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the Second Coming is at hand. The Second Coming. Hardly are those words out, when a vast image of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert a shape with a lion body and the head of a man. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it, real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? Okay, there's a lot in here for a relatively short poem. Looking at the first stanza, it has that the imagery of things getting out of control. Falcon, a gyre, for those who don't know, is kind of like think of a cone getting ever wider, okay? Or it's a spiral that goes up, and each time it goes up, it gets wider and wider. So when the falcon goes too far and cannot hear the commands of the falconer, you have chaos. Things fall apart. Chinua Achebe, his most famous book, Things Fall Apart, which is about colonialism in Nigeria, takes its title from this poem. The center cannot hold. Okay? Think of spinning a top. All right? It starts out on that point, right? But as it slows down, the force gets reduced, and then the top itself starts going like that. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. Well, the blood-red tide is pretty much the death fields of World War One. Everybody, like I said, it weighed heavily on everybody. There were no, even children were no longer innocent. Everybody was scarred. Okay, World War One mentally raped entire generations of people. All right, that's how deeply scarred these people were. The best lack all conviction. The worst are full of passionate intensity. I mean, it's 1919, so it's kind of an early reference, but think about Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was, for all his faults, was an incredible orator. Okay? He could speak. He was passionate in his speeches, which riled people up. Watch one of Donald Trump's rallies, okay? And you'll see his fan base fired up. All right? Whether they... It's not about what he says. It's about an almost frothing at the mouth fanaticism. All right? Look at great public speakers. And that's what it is. They manipulate through their speech. And the way they do that is by creating a level of intensity in their speech that floods over their audience. Okay? The people who know best, the people who are what was the church in Kansas, the Westboro Baptist Church, they know what God's thinking. How do they know? Who knows? But they're the most passionate. They're the ones who would protest funerals of soldiers saying, Marines are dying because God hates gays. Things like that. All right? So that firm conviction in their beliefs. But he says that's the worst. The best lack conviction. They're the ones open to new ideas. They're the ones who were questioning. All right? Second stanza. Surely some revelation is at hand. World War I just ended. It has to mean something. For that many people to die, for that level of destruction, there has to be some sort of meaning to it. Is it the second coming? All right? As soon as he thinks those words, an image of the spiritus mundi, the world spirit, okay, troubles his sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with a lion body and the head of a man. The Sphinx. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun begins to move. Okay, 20 centuries of stony sleep. Well, it's the 20th century, so 2,000 years since the first coming of Christ. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. Beast is another name for the devil, Satan, Lucifer, whatever. Okay, think about that imagery. This rough beast, this creature, malformed, malcontent thing, as opposed to the child of man. Okay? It's heading towards Bethlehem, and again, Jesus from Bethlehem, but it slouches towards Bethlehem. Consider that imagery, that word choice. Why is it slouching? Okay, it's that slow, agonizing movement. And he's questioning, what just happened? The whole world is off its axis right now. How are we supposed to coalesce? How are we supposed to regain some level of control? All right, with the COVID-19 stuff, we keep hearing, oh, we're going to reopen the country. Oh, no, we're going to push that back. Oh, no, we're going to reopen the country. We want to get back to normal. Well, normal is what created this. I mean, yes, it's a natural disaster, but normal is what turned it from a disease into a crippling lockdown situation in many nations. So if we go back to normal, we're just resetting up for failure. Things need to change. How do we regain control? How do we go back but go forward at the same time? All right? This is what Yates is questioning. And he's convinced that humanity's kind of reached its peak and World War I is setting off the end times. But again, that idea of slouching, it's not that the world is coming to an end overnight. It's not Y2K. It's not the Aztecs or the Mayans in 2012. It's this idea of something setting into motion that starts the decline of humanity.